session was driving performance through diversity, equity, and inclusion. The recording of the webinar can be found on our social media platform. As a society, one of our primary goals is to provide value to our members, candidates, and other industry professionals in our network through the delivery of timely professional learning sessions on topical issues shaping the industry. Today's webinar features a discussion on the current immigration trend known as the JAPA syndrome, which is basically the exodus of middle-class and highly skilled Nigerians. As you're aware, this has an adverse impact on corporate organizations. During the discussion of this topic, we will share insights on how to build key talent amidst this challenge, as well as the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. On this note, I want to, on behalf of the Board of Governors of CFA Society Nigeria, thank Mr. Jimmy Obobini, who is the head of consulting at Augusto, for honoring our invitation to speak at this event. Mr. Jimmy, I hope you have the magic wand to address the painful brain drain from Nigeria. Thank you to the DEI committee, which is led by Rita Emoefe, for their commitment in putting these learning sessions together to promote the importance of diversity and inclusion in today's workplace. On this note, I trust that this will be an impactful event, and I want to encourage you all to participate actively by asking questions and sharing your thoughts in the chat box. Once again, thank you for dialing in. Please sit back and enjoy the session. I'll now hand over to the moderator, Rita. Rita, over to you.
Thank you, Chuka, and hello everyone, and welcome to this event. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us today to discuss something that Chuka has mentioned is very topical in today's Nigeria, and that's migration or immigration and talent loss. And I'm sure that if I took a poll within the audience, most of us know 1 or 2 people or 10 people that have left the country in the last 2 to 4, even 5 years. And it's important for us to know as a community, you know, what we should expect going forward in terms of the current immigration trends, and also how all this is likely to impact productivity at various businesses, job opportunities, and in total, you know, is there an upside at all to this at all? And that's why we're here today. Today, speaking to us is Mr. Jimmy Obobine. Jimmy is the head of Augusto Consulting. But I mean, let me say a few more things about Jimmy. Jimmy is a great speaker. He's an expert strategist and macro expert. And in the last decade, Jimmy has been helping executives all over Nigeria and the West African region craft solutions to their business challenges in the area of macro risk, productivity, value creation, and also human capital management. Today, Jimmy is going to be sharing some insights on the current immigration trends in Nigeria. He's going to be giving us tips on how businesses or even individuals can mitigate some of the downsides. And he's just going to give us, this is Nigeria, I don't want to say a crossroads, but we're at the point where we're expecting a new government in later this month. And it'll be interesting. He's going to be giving us his outlook on what we should expect in terms of the economy and also immigration going forward. Now, this is, like Chuka has mentioned, we want this webinar to be very interactive. So I'm going to encourage everyone to, as Jimmy gives his presentation is going to last for about 45 minutes. I'm going to encourage everyone to, if you have questions or you have comments, just put it in the chat box and we will take the questions as soon as his presentation is over. We hope to be able to take as many questions as possible. so we can keep it fluid. So on that note, I want to say thank you to everyone for joining. Very big thank you to Jimmy. And Jimmy, over to you. Welcome to this session.
Thank you very much, Rita. Good day, everyone. I'm careful not to say good morning, just in case people in different parts of the world, especially because we're even talking about immigration today. So thank you very much, Rita. Thank you very much to the CFA Society of Nigeria. I genuinely feel honored to be in your midst. So today, what we're going to be talking about is mitigating talent loss in the current climate. And this has been put together by the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion think tank. I like to refer to them as a think tank of the CFA Society of Nigeria. And it's such a topical issue. So we'll try to do as much as we can over the next 45 minutes and do justice to this topic. We're going to have, this is the overview for today's conversation. We'll look at some historical context, music, and just to show that as a country, we've been here before. Where we are today, we've been here before, and we'll prove it to you in folklore music. We'll also look at some of the global immigration trends. We'll look at Nigeria's immigration trends. We'll also look at the macro context and see if it has an impact on immigration. And very importantly, we'll tell corporations what they cannot do, because we're even looking at beyond profit-making organizations, and that's why we said corporations, non-profit-making organizations, every organization that's in the job of employment. What can you not do about this? And it's important corporations know what they cannot do so that employers, managers stop this feeling of frustration, inadequacy, helplessness can stop, okay? And then we will focus on what can corporations do amidst all of these to win. So that's what we're going to discuss. After the section on Nigeria's macro context and impact on immigration, we would have a short poll organized by Gloria and Mariam. We'll have a short poll. And then eventually, at the end of the whole conversation, when we've looked at what corporations can do, we will have another, we'll have two short polls as well. So after the macro conversation, we'll have a short poll. And then after the entire conversation on what corporations can do, we'll have two short polls. So let's start. At about 1984-85, this Isoko-born lady, my paternal grandmother is Isoko, so permit me to give a bit of credence to the home front. Veno Marioge put out this beautiful song that was on the lips of everyone in the country at that point in time. Nigeria Go Survive. It was like, it replaced the national anthem. It effectively replaced the national anthem in this country. We'll play just about 20-25 seconds of this first clip, and then I'll come back and give you some of the historical context that drove this folklore song at that point. So Gloria, can you please just share the song with us on YouTube? And let's just have about 20 seconds of this song, and then we'll come back and tell you the story of what happened in the mid-80s that led to this song. So let's hear Veno Marioge.
Andrew, don't check out, though. Say what? Stay and build your country. Nigeria go survive. Now who go there for you? God is thicker than water. Nigeria go survive. If Andrew doing work, and me, I do my own, Nigeria.
Okay, thank you very much, Gloria. The rest of the song is on YouTube, so I'm sure a few people will be going to search after this whole conversation. So let's give a bit of historical context to this. The year was 85. Nigeria was on the throes of military rule. We had the recession. For many people in their 30s, even into their early 40s and into their 50s, it's fair to say that the recession of 2016 was the first recession in the adult lives of this generation, Prior to the recession of 2016, the other time we had the recession was in 1984-85 period. So at that point in time, there was a mass emigration of Nigerians like never before. I repeat, like never before. We have never seen a thing like what hit us in 84-85. And the numbers will prove it. So we hear a lot of people who say, oh, things are very bad, everybody is leaving. No, everybody is not leaving. We will show you numbers to prove that what we went through in 84-85 was even worse than what we're going through today. We faced a recession. The currency had crashed. There was high inflation. We had supply chain issues, so companies couldn't even meet supply chain issues. The government was singing the same song they're singing today. Import substitution, rely on homegrown food and homegrown goods and all of that. But what did Nigerians do in 84-85? They walked away. They voted with their feet. And people walked away. There was political instability, not to forget that. There was political instability as well because the military government had taken over from a civilian government. Sounds like what we have today: inflation, currency depreciation, political instability, people fears about the future of the country, and what's the reaction? Like in the 80s, so it is today. People are walking away with their feet. So we saw in that period the mass emigration of professionals. Nigerian doctors found a new home in Saudi Arabia, and there was a huge emigration like never before. And when we look at the numbers, you would see that what we experienced then, we still haven't even experienced today. But at the end of the day, there's a philosophical issue that we finally need to address as a country. Because we would see that at some point in the song as well, Veno did pay tributes to our mineral resource, our rich resource, natural resource base in the country. Mineral resources, commodity resources, talked about cocoa in the West, rubber in Bendel. For those of you who do not know what Bendel is, Bendel used to be Edo Delta fused into one, Ben being Benin, Del being Delta. So that was one state before the state was broken up. Rubber in Bendel, palm oil in the East, timber in Sapele, crude oil in the Delta. So Gloria, if we can just have the second bit of the lines, and then we'll come back to talk about that philosophical conversation we've still not had as a country that is making us surprised at what's happening. We finally need to have that conversation. And it's good that the Gender and Equity and Inclusion team is bringing up that conversation today. So let's have the second part of what Veno was saying then. Gloria?
Yes, coming up.
Okay then, thank you.
Cocoa dey for West, rubber buck for Bendel, Nigeria go survive. Palm oil dey for East, timber dey for Sapele, Nigeria go survive. Groundnut dey for North, rice dey for Benue, Nigeria go survive. Hide and skinny dey, cotton dey for North, Nigeria go survive. Nigeria go survive. Africa go survive.
Okay, so you heard Veno paying tributes to all of our natural resources: cocoa, cotton, timber, groundnuts, palm oil, and all of the commodities. But what we've never appreciated about our country, and till date, is that our biggest resource aren't all of these things. Our biggest resource is human talent, is our human talent. And a quote by President Bill Clinton does help reinforce this belief, this argument that our human resources are biggest talent. America, in one of those endless wars with verbal wars with Russia, at that time, President Obama said that the Russians talk about their oil, but we talk about Microsoft, we talk about Google, we talk about Apple. Now, you know the interesting thing, oil is a natural resource. You didn't have to work to put it in the ground. You only have to work to get it out of the ground. But what about Apple? Is it a natural resource? Is Microsoft a natural resource? Is Google a natural resource? No, these are outputs of innovation. And what leads to innovation is human talent. So for too long as a country, we've thought our natural resources were key commodities and key resources. But what immigration is proving to us is that smart countries, rich smart countries, recognize that Nigeria's biggest resource is the human talent. And that's what we're suddenly seeing. And it's like that lover who's losing that, like that person who is losing that lover that has always been loyal. And at that point when that loyal lover is departing, you're suddenly saying that, how could you leave me? But you were never loyal to this person when he or she was offering you love. And upon departure, you want to retain the person. Have we recognized that human talent is our greatest resource? How come when the human talent is now immigrating, we're now scrambling here and there to look at it? So that's what we're going to look at today, okay? So a bit of historical context. Now, it's not a Nigerian problem, and these headlines do suggest that. The cable, Nigerians to benefit as Canada unveils. Now, look at it. Nigerians to benefit as Canada unveils plan to welcome 1.4 million immigrants by 2025. So, between today and 2025, 2-3 years away, Canada seeks to bring in 1.4 million migrants, high-quality migrants, if I may add to that headline. In other words, Canada is looking to bring in people. So it's not just Nigeria looking to lose people. Canada is looking to bring in people. And the question is, where's Canada going to bring these people from? We will see. Another headline by the World Economic Forum: why talent shortages are a risk to global business. Risk to global business. In other words, it's not a Nigerian peculiar problem, it's a global problem. Talent shortages. So Canada is seeking to bring high quality talent, 1.4 million by 2025. The World Economic Forum is telling us that talent shortages are a risk to global business. In other words, businesses are suffering from talent shortages. And what they will do in this, amidst this risk, is not to just give birth to children who will not be able to fill in those vacancies overnight.
Jimmy, is your
Hello, Rita.
presentation running? We can't see
No,
it.
it's not running.
Okay.
What slide can you see?
It's nothing showing.
Oh, wow. Okay. Let me just probably just end it and then just add it again. And just, let me just do it all over again. Just. I want to believe you can see it now. What I have here is global immigration trends.
Yes, we can now.
Okay, then. Thank you very much for that. Why talent shortages are a risk to global business. So just to prove once again that this is not a Nigerian problem, it's a global problem. In UK, there was Brexit, own goal, a miscalculation by the Conservative Party, decided to go insular when the rest of the world is going global. And what has it led to? The Guardian of UK, not of Nigeria. Shortfall of 330,000 workers in UK due to Brexit, say think tanks. What do you think the UK wants to do about this 330,000 worker shortfall? Fill the shortages, of course. Where would they get those talents from? That's what we're here to examine today. Another headline from the BBC. These are all foreign media apart from the cable. Why asylum seekers are choosing Canada in record numbers. Okay? The two key takeaways from this headline: choosing Canada, record numbers. Choosing Canada, record numbers. So those are two key takeaways. You need to recognize them. And what's actually going on here? So we've shown you headlines to tell you that the rich Western nations are looking for talents. They're suffering talent shortages. And these are our global headlines to prove that. So what's the context really? Look at it as a marriage. This whole immigration issue, look at it as a marriage. At some point, when parents build big houses and they have kids there, at some point, the kids say that, I'm leaving this home that I've always known, family, and I'm going into a marriage with another party. So I have to leave home and get into this marriage. See immigration as a marriage. Who's the groom in this context? Some of the headlines we've shown you suggest that Canada is a groom here. Okay? You've got rich Western nations, first world nations. In the context of Canada, you're looking at a first world North American country. When grooms are profiled, if Canada were a human being, Canada would be an alpha groom when you're profiling grooms. Rich, first world North American country. All right? You have UK, English-speaking country. I'm not going to praise them too much. Probably they don't deserve too much praises. You have the US, but nevertheless, 6 hours away from Nigeria. So you can't take that away from the UK. They're 6 hours away from us. Huge cultural context. Lots of us have lots of family members there, lots of friends there. So we can easily absorb if we choose to go there. What about the US, the richest country in the world? Hey, do they need any introductions really when we're talking of profiling grooms? So these are some of the grooms, rich first world nations in urgent need of high quality talent. What about the profile of the brides? Now, on the face of it, when we say poor third world nations, it nearly seems as if, oh, we're depressing the profile of the brides. But no, not so. Because this is what makes the bride attractive to the groom. And this is what makes the bride want to leave. Like, look, I'm in a poor country, a rich country wants me. Why am I saying no? All right? So first you have poor third world countries, but they're not just poor. They also have citizens who want to emigrate. Willing buyer, willing seller arrangements. Your CFA students and charter holders, so that's very clear to you. So you have a willing buyer and a willing seller arrangement. What's really going to hold anyone down in such a negotiation? Poor third world countries with citizens seeking to emigrate. But now let's divorce Nigeria from the rest of the other flags we have there, Zimbabwe, South Africa. Let's take away Nigeria. And let's go back to Venus' song and our critique of Venus' song, where we said that there's an overemphasis on Nigeria's context as a commodity-rich country, mineral-rich country. We've never really seen ourselves as a talent-rich country. We're over 200 million people. We speak English. The language of instruction in Nigeria is English. For the broader context, for the broader majority of people, we have heavily, I repeat, heavily subsidized university education. We churn out over 1 million graduates every year who've been instructed to speak in English. What's the language of business in Canada? What's the language of business in UK? What's the language of business in US? It's English, all right? And we are churning out talents who've learnt English from their childhood. Forget all this, you get to do this test and all of that. No, that's just a bit of paperwork, really. But in the broader context, we've got hundreds of universities in this country, private universities, federal universities, state universities, faith-based universities, churning out over 1 million graduates every year who learning to speak, who've learned instructions in English. And then you now have quite a number of middle-class Nigerians who've worked in proper white-collar jobs, who've done proper white-collar jobs in the tech sector, finance sector, medicine, sciences, digital, IT, and all of that, media. So in the thoughts of the rich Western nations looking for talents, we are the beautiful bride with those talents. I repeat, we're the beautiful bride with those talents. Why? We're a huge country, 200 million people. We've got cheap university education, very cheap university education. It's one of the best things Nigeria does offers to its citizens, all right? And recently on the WhatsApp group, people were lambasting Nigeria for losing so many doctors to the UK. And I then had to ask that, I'm sorry, but why is all of the blame going to Nigeria for losing doctors? Why isn't UK getting a part of the blame for not training enough doctors? Because for UK to be poaching so many doctors and medical workers from Nigeria, it also shows that their system has not produced enough medical staff. All right? And we can blame our schools for all we can, oh, mushroom universities and all of that. But guess what? All it takes to be a practicing doctor in the UK is to graduate from a mushroom university in Nigeria and write 1 or 2 exams, pass those exams, and you're practicing in the UK from a mushroom university here in Nigeria. So this is the story. We're a talent-rich country, a country rich in human talent. And in today's world, where the rich countries are seeking to fill labor shortages, seeking to correct population imbalances, what they will then do is turn to a country like Nigeria and poach and raid and collect our people, okay? So now, let's then look at some of Nigeria's immigration context. Let's look at numbers to actually put up an argument that maybe we're not yet in some level of crisis. This was a Pew Research conducted in 2018, 2019. Quite a number of countries across the world were examined. And it asked residents of those countries that, do you plan to relocate within the next 5 years? Guess who was highest on the list? Nigeria. 45% of Nigerians who were surveyed said that they have relocation plans over the next 5 years. In other words, for every 100 Nigerians who were surveyed, 45 of them said, we want to leave. Remember, we're hearing about the Greek financial crisis, the Greece financial crisis a few years ago. But look at it in context. Only 7% of the Greeks, with all of their financial crisis, want to leave. Look at Kenya, just 19%. Tunisia, another African country, 24%. India, a huge country of over 1 billion, now the largest populated country in the world, 2%. Poor Italy, poor part of Europe, only 5%. Nigeria, 45%. So let's keep that number in context. Now, I'm going to take away this. Oh, no, come back. Oh, okay. Let's look at these interesting charts. We talked a lot about the 1980s and emigration, how bad things were then that led Veno to that song, led the Nigerian government into all sorts of public campaigns about begging people not to emigrate and trying to convince people. Look at the number. Like I said, things were so bad then, they've never been that bad before. The red line actually shows net emigration, close to 550,000 Nigerians. So what do we mean by net emigration? What we mean is that what the World Bank does, this is data from the World Bank. The World Bank looks at those who have come into your country versus those who have gone out of your country, and looks at matches of the two. And Nigeria is in this net negative position because more people left than more people came in. Over 550,000, about 550,000 left in 1985 when Veno sang that song we started off with. And then look at more recent numbers. Today, 2021, just around 100,000 people have left, net emigration. In other words, we are still nowhere near where we were in the 80s when about 500,000 people left in 1 year. But this is the message from this chart. The blue chart actually looks at our real GDP. In other words, our growth rate as a country, economic growth rate. This is what you need to recognize, that there may be a recession this year and the net emigration that year may not be too high. Why? Because emigration requires some level of paperwork and documentation. So there's always a lag effect. In other words, a recession in 1981, 84, and it's in 1984, 85, you get to see emigration because people have to do paperwork, except of course you tend to walk across the Sahara Desert, of which people weren't doing them. And even the great majority of people aren't going through the Sahara Desert. So you would see that in the blue charts, we had recessions, like I said then, 84, 85, 1981, and all of the economic crises that led to the, and there's no justification for a military coup though, but that led to the excuses that led to that military coup. So look at how economic growth was in that period. It was negative. And look at the effects on immigration, negative as well. Then let's come to more recent times. 2015, 2016, look at the huge dip we suffered within that 2015, 2016 period in net immigration. And look at the real GDP growth as well. We got into a recession as well, okay? What this shows is that there's some level of correlation between your economic growth or lack of growth and immigration. In other words, when the economy contracts and people aren't as economically prosperous and buoyant as they used to be, then it triggers mass immigration or it triggers some level of immigration. So that's the key takeaway from this point. And then we'll just have a bit of context as well, some numbers to just play around with. Are we exaggerating the immigration to Canada? Because what the numbers do show from the Canadian authorities, not from the Nigerian government, from the Canadian authorities is that 2022 was our highest level of immigration to Canada since over the last 7 years. And just around 22,000 people emigrated from Nigeria to Canada. Remember, you have a numerator and you have a denominator. Your numerator of Nigerians who have exited to Canada in 2022 is 22,000. Your denominator. Okay, I'm sorry. Your denominator is the population of this country. And let's even contract the population just for the ease of arithmetic, 200 million people. So 22,000 to 200 million people doesn't sound to me like a crisis yet, okay? Doesn't sound to me like a crisis yet. But some areas of concern, because we'll talk about how corporations are suffering even from these 22,000 people who left in 2022. But if you add up all of the numbers on this chart, you'd struggle to bring up all of those numbers to 150,000, okay, between 2015 and 2022. But we recognize that this is just one country, Canada. Nigerian applications received by the UK for study. We know the game that is going on between the UK and Nigeria. The UK says, oh, come for study, but we'll give you a 2-year post-study visa. Nigerians say, I'm going to study, but we both know we're not coming back, okay? So we also decided to look at those numbers. 61,000 people, 26,000 people in 21, 61,000 people. In other words, the number more or less, more than doubled in just 1 year. Why? Like I said earlier, historical and cultural context between Nigeria and the UK. I also said that English speaking, UK is 6 hours away. And like we all know, the UK study route on the surface of it seems to be a shorter and a simpler immigration path to immigration than the Canadian path, okay? So you can see that more people are choosing this easier path to the UK. But at the same time, Nigerian applications to the UK for work, 27,000 people in 2022, 8,800 in 21. In other words, the number more than tripled in just 1 year. So the UK is looking more and more to Nigerians for work. So while Nigerians think the only part to UK is study, you can see that even the 27,000 number is bigger than the Canadian number, which is making all of the headlines. Everybody's going to Canada, everybody's going to Canada. But only 22,000 people went last year, while 27 people went to the UK. Overall, to the UK, 88,000 people did go last year, okay? And then this is the US. 2018, look at what the numbers were, 221,000 peak. Numbers have dropped now because of some of the backlash of all of the tougher immigration stance to the US. Now, let's look at our macro context to see what are some of the macro indicators driving these factors. We've shown you what GDP was, and we've shown you the correlation between GDP and immigration. The long-term rate of inflation over the last 10 years has been 13%. In other words, we're looking at how money loses value in this country. On the average, over the last 10 years and over the last 2 decades, money has lost value by about 13%. But in more recent times, what are we seeing? That our inflation numbers are even higher than the long-term rate of inflation. So the projection for this year is 22%. Last year was around 20%. So the value of the currency that we hold is weakening. And when the value of the currency is weakening in terms of inflation, the price of things getting weaker, rising as a result of inflation, people feel poorer. In quotes, people are actually poorer. Now, end period exchange rates. Look at the exchange rates. Look at what the exchange rates were in 2013, over a decade ago, about 172. Our projection for this year, around 750 today, okay? So 172, 750 today within a decade. Your currency has lost more than 4 times its value. What that means is that every dollar you held, you became 4 times richer. Every naira you held in dollar context, you became 4 times poorer. All of these things are some of the drivers of immigration, whether we know it's, when people emigrate, they don't do these calculations, but these are some of the underlying macro factors driving these things. Now, real GDP per person. In terms of real GDP per person, where were we in 2013? 364,000. Where are we today? Projection for 2023 is 351,000. We peaked over the decade in 2015 at 383. Today we're at 351. What does this indicate? In terms of when you spread the GDP divided by the population, each person walks away with a smaller amount vis-a-vis what we had a decade ago. So on the average, you can see that the wealth of the average Nigerian has depleted in dollar terms and even in naira terms, okay? And then real wages. We've taken some of the biggest listed 9 to 10 companies, and we've computed these numbers using 2014 as a base year. What we're saying here is that what workers are earning on average between 2014 to date, we're earning 70% of what we're earning in 2014, even if salaries have risen as a result of inflation, adjusted. Your wages adjusted for inflation is just about 70%. So all of these just draw upon Nigeria's macro context, showing how tough things have been here and why immigration may just be a likely option for people who have been on the lower rung, or people who even feel quite insecure about the future, economic future of the country, political future of the country. What about unemployment rate? 36% last year. Projection for this year is 38%. What does this mean? It means that about 4 out of every 10 employable Nigerians is unemployed. About 4. You pick up one of those unemployed Nigerians, especially those who have suffered long-term unemployment, and you say that there's a chance to emigrate. Be honest with yourself. What does this person have to lose accepting that immigration option? The worst that will happen is that upon immigration, the person will be unemployed over there, which is just what was happening to the person here. So the person says, I'm not sure if I'll be employed here, but I'm sure I've not been employed here. So let me take this option. He that is down needs fear no fall. He that is low, no pride. Okay? So the words of those poems speak to this context. Now, Mariam, maybe we'll just wait till the end to just take the polls all at once so that, because of my time, so that I can work within the time we have, and then maybe those polls will even help ignite questions from people. So if you do not mind, Rita, can I take the liberties to just complete it, and then we'll take the polls afterwards?
That's fine. Go ahead.
Okay. So it doesn't break the narrative. So we've looked at the macro context. We've looked at the global immigration trends. We've looked at the historical context. We've shown that this has happened before. We've been here before, and it was triggered by worsening economic performance of the country. We've also shown that the problems seem to be beyond Nigeria. Countries across the world, the rich Western countries, are suffering talent shortages. And what they are doing to stimulate their economic growth and to help corporations survive is that they are looking to attract talents from countries that are talent rich and less economically empowered. We've also looked at the macro context, and we've shown numbers that some may say look depressing, look sobering. High unemployment rates, high inflation rates, worsening currency rates, and all the indicators just speak to people asking themselves, maybe if I may emigrate, I do not lose much. And then let's bring this home to corporations, to organizations. First, let's tell corporations what they cannot do. Remember the topic, we're looking at mitigating talent losses, okay? Mitigating talent losses. So we're going to bring this home and have a conversation on what corporations can do. But it's also important we know what corporations cannot do. So if you're an employer, you're a manager, you are a HR person, and you're saying to yourself, what can I do? First, know what you can't do. What you cannot do is that you may not be able to stop aspiring emigres. When people say they want to leave, there's a whole lot more on their minds beyond what your organization offers to them. Okay? So when people say they want to leave, don't get frustrated. Don't hate. Don't hate them. Don't hate Nigeria. All right? Because there's a whole lot more, and there's maybe little you can do in that context. It's a global systemic issue. Okay? So corporations need to recognize that there are systemic issues beyond the scope of the corporations. When people say they want to leave, the factors that make them want to leave Nigeria are beyond the scope, beyond the raison d'etre of why your organization has been established. So what are some of the thoughts and factors beyond the reach of corporations when people say they want to leave? What are some of those reasons why they want to leave? People want to leave because of opportunity. They want to leave because of opportunity. You're here in Nigeria, you're an IT person. Amazon reaches out to you on LinkedIn. It's a bit flattering, actually. It's a bit flattering. The mere fact that Amazon reaches out to you on LinkedIn, it just flatters you. Like, me, Amazon, they want to, what have they seen in me? Okay, let me hear what they want to say. All right? Or maybe you're a manager here in Nigeria. That mentee you trained on the job, he relocates, and the next thing he tells you, oh, I work at Microsoft head office. You're like, are you Microsoft head office? I trained you now. If you're good enough for Microsoft head office, then I'm also good enough for Microsoft head office. And he hears the salary. Oh, my starting salary was $120,000, $150,000. What am I doing here? I'm coming. All right? So opportunity. No matter how the biggest Nigerian corporation is not as big as some of these names we have called. So we need to recognize that. People also want to leave because of healthcare. Anyone who's, some people will tell you that it takes one serious ailment to bring a Nigerian middle class from middle class to below the poverty line. One terrible ailment can just do that to a family in Nigeria. So families who have experienced these kinds of health care issues, it just seems to be like the unarguable path. All right? Education. We've not invested enough in public education. Yes, I know I've praised the fact that we've got subsidized education, university education, and all of that. But quite a number of people will tell you their experiences when they immigrated, public education on their children, the public education impact on their children. Then you even have older people, middle-class people who are saying, I want Ivy League education, I want foreign university education, and then these ones go for, they immigrate and then go for masters, all right? Law and order. I showed a colleague yesterday from the window of our office how the tricycles, the small buses, they just stop in the middle of the road to pick passengers. And those things can actually irk. It makes life difficult. It creates traffic, insecurity across the country, kidnapping, banditry, all of these things, whether you've been affected or you've not been affected, what these things do is that they just lead to a siege mentality and affect people's mindsets about the long-term viability of the country. And then there are some subtle things that we may not recognize. But every time you go abroad, the scenery has an impact on your mood. The green, the greenery, the scenery. And we've underinvested as a country. I was saying so to my boss at Augusto a few months ago, Mrs. Adele Conda. We've underinvested as a country and as a people in our scenery. There's barely anywhere you walk around in this country that just gives you joys. You sometimes see a few pictures, but we've underinvested in urban scenery. And then you have that staff who says, I want dual citizenship from any of these first world countries we mentioned. What do you do? The person just wants to go, all right? So we've cleared the rules about what organizations cannot do, but there's a whole lot we can do. So this is not to dampen you, but it's to first clear the rule book about what can we do, and then let's focus on what we can do. First, we need to recognize two things before we even go into what organizations can do. Not everyone wants to immigrate. Not everybody wants to. Some people freeze mentally and physically in this winter. We've celebrated Canada. But what about the winters of Canada? Some would tell you Canada is an empty country. Some would say it's a lonely country. There are people who have been to the UK and you just sit in their rooms and just weep as a result of loneliness. And they say, Lord, what am I doing here? Is the economic prosperity enough to keep me here? And we have seen people who've just packed their bags and said, I'm coming to Nigeria. Whatever Nigeria wants to offer in terms of negatives, I'm going back. Now, remember something. The Pew Research number shows that 45% wants to leave. And we screamed is a huge number. But what does the flip side of that number show? It shows that 55% have no plans to leave. 55% of 200 million. It's still more than 100 million people. What's Ghana? The Ghana we're all screaming about. 100 million is 3 times Ghana's population. And we're saying that more than 100 million people are still saying we don't want to leave. All right? So not everybody wants to emigrate. At the same time, what corporations also need to understand is that because not everybody wants to emigrate, some are still here and they have no intentions to leave. However, we've shown you numbers of people leaving. The majority of those people are leaving from the middle class, the white-collar middle class. About 90,000 have gone to the UK. About over 20,000 have gone to Canada. Just 100,000 from those 2 countries. We also showed you numbers to the US. What does this mean? It means that those 100,000 people, 20,000 people, the numbers who have gone, the 200,000 we showed you at some point that went to the US, all left jobs, businesses, employments here in Nigeria. So it created vacancies. And what does this mean? It means that every organization who has lost someone to Canada, to US, to UK, to Australia, needs to fill that vacancy. That has created a war, a spiral chain. You go to organization A, you poach organization A, then has that vacancy. It has to go to organization X, to poach someone, organization X has to go to organization Y, and there's a spiral effect. So immigration has created a local poaching war, even amongst those who choose not to leave. So Amazon says, come to Canada, and you say, no, thank you. If you're not going to give me the summer I'm enjoying all year round in Nigeria, nothing is bringing me to Canada. I'm not going, okay? But hey, guess what? Another corporation has lost someone to Canada because you declined that Amazon job to Canada. So you are just happy on your own terms in Nigeria and your own company doing your own thing. And that vacancy that was created by that person who went to Amazon in Canada means that the organization is now looking to poach you to fill that vacancy. And then it has created a local poaching war. And we need to understand what this means. So finally, bringing it home, what then can corporations do? Okay? We've said that people want to leave and there's nothing we can do to stop them. So you have a staff who is in your office doing the paperwork to leave, to go to Canada or to UK. He's going to go when his papers click, in quotes. What then can you do? First, we believe that organizations need to have what we call informal early communication of immigration plans. What does this mean? I've seen it working in an organization or two. There's a level of bond between managers and subordinates such that the subordinate, the staff feels confident enough to go to his manager or to our manager to say that, hello, manager, I'm working on my Canadian papers and I may be leaving at the end of the year. I just thought to tell you now, 6 to 9 months ahead, because you've been nice to me. I love the job. I love what I do here. I love the organization, but there are wider issues why I've chosen to relocate. But because of my love for you and this organization and what you've done for me, I don't think I should leave you hanging. So I want to tell you well ahead of time. And the staff whispers to that manager, I'm immigrating later on in the year. And then the manager goes to HR, goes upline to say that this integral staff in my team says he or she will be leaving at the end of the year. What are our replacement plans? It's all whisper at that stage, but it's very important. And I've seen it help organizations mitigate that immigration risk, manage the outflow and inflow process, such that, remember that usually on letters, what do you see? Between 1 to 3 months notice. But you find out that even those 3 months notice for companies that go as far as saying 3 months, sometimes it's not enough to fill that vacancy. Just take yourself through the recruitment process, interviewing, testing, assessments. The person or the people you finally give letters also have their own 1 to 3 months waiting period where they now have to give notices. Some people would say, I've not gone on a leave in a while. I can't go on a leave after I join you. So I want to take a garden leave, which only adds to the time. What this early communication plan does is that it allows companies start well ahead of time to replace that emigrating staff, to do proper handovers and all. However, the sheer number of people leaving means that sometimes corporations just can't even hire from the outside. I heard of one bank that one very important unit lost 80% of staff within a very short window to immigration, 80% of staff to immigration. So sometimes what organizations need to do is that you need to reskill, you need to retrain. I find it very unacceptable when companies complain of training. I find it unacceptable when companies say, oh, you have to retrain. It's not easy to train. Oh, staff are not easy. What's that? All of the work we are doing, did we study it in university? No, we didn't. Did you and I study what we are discussing today in university? We didn't. It's training and retraining and critical thinking and critical analysis that got us to this point where we can discuss issues quite abstract from what our lecturers taught us in school. So you need to reskill, you need to retrain. Any employer, organization that isn't investing sufficiently in reskilling and retraining will lose. It's not a curse, it's a call. You will lose in the current climate. Remember the topic again, mitigating talent loss in the current climate. If you're not ready to reskill and retrain, you will lose in the current climate. Managers need to be able to retrain and reskill people. So you find people in units, maybe you find someone in an operations unit who is not happy, maybe he has got a CFA and he's just in an operations unit and he's crying about the work he's doing because he feels that he's not deserving of his CFA qualification. You have a treasury unit or an investment management unit that is losing hands to Canada, and you have this CFA charter holder in the operations unit who's chosen not to emigrate, and you do not realize that you can actually poach internally, move him, start training the person, and start reskilling the person because he already has the academic and professional background and qualifications. Organizations also need to diversify between Lagos, Abuja, and Port Harcourt. It's a bit lazy. We've done it for quite a while, but it's a bit indolent, and we have to be out of it. I was in Owerri recently for an assignment, and the level of talent I saw in Owerri, splendidly high. From the Uber driver who picked me up at the airport, a computer graduate of Federal University of Technology, Owerri. And the conversation he had with me blew my mind. I was in between crying, laughing, hugging him, celebrating him. It was just a high intellectual conversation I had with the young man. But what was he doing? He was driving Uber. And I had those kinds of conversations with quite a number of talents in Owerri. And across the country, you see this level of talent, yet we keep crying because we're focused on Lagos, focused on Abuja, focused on Port Harcourt. So you find banks who want to recruit for their Ibadan office. They're poaching people from Lagos and taking them to Ibadan. Ibadan is bursting at its seams with talent. We're taking people from Lagos and taking them to Ibadan. Ilorin is bursting at its seams because Ilorin has several universities, just like Owerri has several universities. All of the tertiary institutions in Imo State put together are close to 10. All sorts of tertiary institutions, federal universities, national university, federal polytechnics, all sorts of federal institutions close to 10. Why will an organization that wants to recruit for its regional office in the Southeast come to Lagos, poach staff, and then take them? You can poach locally as well there. Organizations need to invest in entry-level hiring to create some slack at the bottom. All right? What we need to do, this reskill and retrain ought to be university job fairs, internships. It's something we've not really done very well in Nigeria. And that's why you see abroad, a fresh graduate comes out and is already telling you, I have 2 years work experience. And you're saying, how do you have 2 years work experience? You're a fresh graduate. How come? But it's all of the holiday internships put together that make up those 18 to 24 months. What we need to do is to start those aggressive internships such that it becomes like a primary for talent hiring. So I'm going to a university and I'm regularly taking interns from that university to come during their long-term holidays and even short-term holidays, such that I can begin to recognize talents that I'm already telling you, you already have a job here when you graduate. All right. So don't bother yourself about looking for a job when you graduate. I'm already training you, skilling you up, teaching you my culture, teaching you my ways of doing things, teaching you my work, such that by the time you leave, there's already a job waiting for you. And then organizations have to create growth opportunities for staff. Some people who have left, all of the macro issues Nigeria had wasn't why they left. They just felt stuck in their careers. How do you have people who have been a decade on a job, no promotion? Why is the organization doing that to them? If they're not good enough, maybe you should let them go. All right? So if someone has been with you 10 years, no promotion, and you're still retaining him, and you're even increasing his salary, something is wrong with both parties or either parties. So what we think is that organizations need to create growth opportunities for staff, such that, remember, we have said that not everybody wants to go. These people do not want to go. So we've got to create growth opportunities for those who choose not to go. Remember, there's a local poaching war. there's a local poaching war. In times past, your 15 organization wants to hire you. But today, organizations are scrambling for themselves to hire anybody who wants to move. Whether you're 50, 55, do you want to work? Yes, then we will hire you, even if you're going to work for 2 years before your retirement, because I have nobody to fill these urgent vacancies I have today. Organizations also have to sharpen recruitment and poaching skills, networking, LinkedIn. These are make or mar issues today for HR managers, okay? Make or mar issues today for HR managers. Organizations also need to create succession working frameworks. It's a non-negotiable today, especially for big organizations. You've got to have a succession planning framework. If you don't have one, you should have one. What about workplace culture? If you've got a toxic culture today, you're going to be a net donor of talent to other organizations. In today's market, why would anyone want to work for a toxic boss in a toxic environment where there's immigration that has created a local poaching war and people are having 3 job offers and saying to themselves that which should I pick from? And you are giving them toxic culture? Come on, behave, all right? It's not going to work in today's world, in today's climate in Nigeria. And then I'm asking a question because I do not know your books. But what the local poaching war does, and is left for you to make your call and judgment on that, is that it creates a remuneration war as well. At that end at Augusto Consulting, what are we seeing? We're seeing more interest in remuneration surveys. More organizations are coming for, just come in. We need remuneration surveys. We need remuneration surveys. And why are they coming for remuneration surveys? Because they see that initially you felt good with yourself that, okay, I've lost this staff to Canada. I've lost this staff to UK, to the US, to a big corporation in those countries. But hey, guess what? This staff who didn't want to emigrate, I've lost him to a local rival. And he has shown me his offer letter, and it actually beats what I'm offering him or offering her. So I do not know your books, but how competitive is your remuneration structure? Because if your remuneration structure is not competitive enough today, you'll be a net donor in this local poaching war. Okay, you'll be the one providing the soldiers to those who are looking for talents. All right. And then to close out on our arguments, we need to ask ourselves, Nigeria needs to think about certain things in the labor market. Is there a labor market mismatch in Nigeria today? And I ask this question because we say we have a high unemployment rate, right? We also say we have a high graduate unemployment rate. But there's also an increasing immigration rate. In other words, some of these people that we thought were not good enough for the labor markets in Nigeria, for the job markets in Nigeria, are good enough for some foreign country richer than us. Is that a clear argument? So someone who's unemployed in Nigeria finds his way abroad, and next thing you hear, he tells you he's working in a social place, and you're wondering, really? How did he get there? So he's not good enough for that smaller company in Nigeria, but he's good enough for that bigger country in a rich Western nation. We also claim we have unfilled vacancies and we're looking for staff and we can't find staff. Hey, I thought we said we had a high unemployment rate. Hey, I thought we said we had a high graduate unemployment rate as well. So how come about the high unfilled vacancies? The conclusion here is that we think there may be a labor market mismatch. And one of the ways to correct this labor market mismatch is some of the things we've talked about, especially retraining, retooling, and reskilling. Okay, so thank you very much, everyone. Rita, Mariam, I think you can conduct your polls. I think I may have just overshot my time a bit.
That's
Thank
fine,
you.
Jimmy. Maybe we should go start with the first. Thank you so much, Jimmy. Thank you for that great presentation. Maybe you can just, let's do the first poll and see if we have time for the second one. Clear.
Okay then. Or Mariam, maybe you want to just throw all the polls at once, easy questions, and then.
Yes, we can throw everything all at once.
Okay, go ahead then.
Okay.
Is there a problem with, okay, people, okay, go ahead, that's great.
Rita, maybe we can start with the questions.
No, I'm
While
just looking at the number of people that have answered. I think I was, for a minute, I think there was a pause, but I think it's going on now.
okay.
Tell us when you want us to end it.
That's Mariam, right?
Laura, I think Gloria, the one handling the
Okay.
poll. So tell us when you want us to stop it, Jimmy.
Okay. Mariam, if you just look at the number of people that you think we've had a healthy response vis-a-vis the number of people in the session, then I think we can just take what the poll numbers will be. Okay.
So we have about 64% response rate. So basically 106 people right now have answered the poll. More people are still answering the poll.
Give it like 30 more seconds and then we should close out. I think that's fine.
Okay. We have 71% response rate, so I think we can close out and share the results.
Please do.
Okay.
Okay, so just to analyze the result, the first question says that, what are the biggest macro risks that may be stimulating immigration? Now, there's no right or wrong answer. It's a poll, and this is your opinion about it. So it's your opinion. I remember that in your own view, one issue may be bigger than the other. Now, 34% of respondents have said that increasing depreciation of the Naira is the biggest macro risk that may be stimulating immigration. While 30% have said that high unemployment rate is the biggest factor. 24% have said insecurity, and 9% have said inflation, and then 3% have said others. So what this then means is that if the Naira is the biggest factor, what this means is that there's some interesting data I actually didn't emphasize when I was going through this part, to actually show that, okay, I can't even see my own screen again. Okay, okay, the poll is actually blocking my screen. But basically it's to show that in 2005, between 2005, 2007, when the economy stabilized and currency stabilized and inflation, we're able to tame inflation. The currency of Nigeria stabilized. There was greater political stability. What did we see? We actually saw more inflows into Nigeria inward immigration than outward immigration. And part of that inward immigration was supported by Nigerians returning to the country. So that's what we did see. I was in investment banking in that era. And at some point in time, the level of accents that was flying on corridors in investment banking in Nigeria, my accent had no place basically, because you had more foreign accents on corridors and in lifts than even local Nigerian accents. Why? Because you had lots of people coming back home because the currency, the economy had stabilized. And remember that even for people emigrating, there are also issues on the other side, all right? There are labor issues on the other side. There's the glass ceiling, career glass ceiling on the other side. People get to a point and they just say, I can't take this cold anymore. My knees are stiff. For my age, I can't do this anymore. I'm going back home, all right? But that trigger to come back home, what makes it more attractive and what stimulates it beyond people just wanting to come home is the relative economic stability and prosperity on this side. So it's also possible that if our economy stabilizes like we did see in the last, in 2005-07, we could also see the same tendencies again. Thanks. Mariam, the next question.
Maybe we should also ask, we should start asking some of the questions, answer some of the questions that people are putting out there. I was going to say that I think the key takeaways that I gleaned from the presentation is about retraining, retooling, and reskilling. And based on that, one of my first questions would be about, culture. You talked about culture and how that impacts, even the workplace, so that people who don't plan to emigrate, how can culture and help companies keep their staff? Can you just give us a few of a couple of cultural practices that you think that workers actually value and employers might need to consider providing or creating that kind of space?
Okay. Remember we talked about why people want to go and what companies cannot do. And we spoke about things like healthcare, law and order. If you live in a city like Lagos, it means that you spend a good proportion of your day in traffic. That's what it implies, all right? So one of the key takeaways and learnings from COVID was that we all didn't need to be in the office to work. We could work remotely. On this session, there are different people from different parts of the world. Pre-COVID, a session like this, the chances of success of a session like this would have been slimmer than it is today, all right? Some of us are working from home, some of us are working from the office and all of that. So beyond even remuneration, these are some of the competitive practices in today's labor market. Does your workplace give a certain level of flexibility in terms of work mode? Because we're seeing in our HR desk at Augusto Consulting, we're seeing employees or potential employees who are asking, can I work hybrid? And it's a deal breaker for staff today. It's a deal breaker. I can't work hybrid. Oh, okay. I'm not taking this offer. All right. We're also seeing people who are leaving organizations because those organizations are still a bit too traditional and not permitting hybrid work. Okay. Now that's one aspect of things. Secondly, we also remember that we have a generation. Some people, someone wrote to me telling me that, could I help his daughter find work because he wanted her to work in an office, a physical office, because she was the COVID generation of labor of employees. They started work virtually, and that's all they know. That's all they know. So those people have learned the culture of signing off on toxic bosses. I learned of someone who removed his boss from a virtual meeting The boss was saying the one he wasn't supposed to say. The guy went to the meeting room. He was the host of the meeting and just removed his boss from the meeting room. So people are learning how to even manage toxicity in the workplace now. But if what you bring to the table is beyond their mitigation capabilities, there's a likelihood that they walk away. Okay, so the level of toxic culture, work-life harmony, how flexible is the workplace, even the trainings, on-the-job trainings, off-the-job trainings. All of these are part of the things that, you know, enable workplace culture, that drive workplace culture. The level of harmony in that organization. Can an employee go to a manager to say, I do not understand? And the manager says, okay, sit down and let me explain to you. Or will that employee need to go to a quiet corner, make some prayers before approaching a manager to just say, I don't understand this brief, because you're not sure the level of opprobrium that manager is going to throw at you for simply asking a question. Okay, I remember we said that reskilling, retooling, these are some of the everyday things with reskilling, retooling. As a manager, people will have to be able to come to you 50 times to ask 50 questions. So you as a manager, you must train yourself to say that I need to be able to answer questions, because we just poach this person from operations to investment management. If I say don't ask questions, then the person is going to make errors on the job that will have a bigger impact. So reskilling and retraining means that I must be able to answer all of the person's questions as often as possible. So Rita, I hope that helps.
Yeah, I like that. I like that, especially the part about, really pointing out that retraining, reskilling is not just for lower cadre staff. It's also for the entire organization, from the top to the bottom, the executives, the managers as well. So it's all about retraining, reskilling, so that we can do what is right in today's Nigeria with our specific kinds of workforces. Okay, and that kind of leads me on to one of the questions we have. It's kind of similar, and they've said that that do you consider a work from anywhere policy as something organizations can do to manage the immigration trend, which is, you've kind of alluded to that with your last comments, but they've also said something, they also asked about, the level of support it will require, coming from the organization's point of view, especially regarding immigration and tax compliance. Do you know anything about, or will that, how does that play
in terms of work from anywhere? We'll say that there are risks attached to it. There are risks attached to it, quite a number of risks attached to it. And I'm happy that the questionnaire did raise the tax issues attached to it. When COVID happened, it happened all of a sudden on the whole world. No one was prepared for it. Nobody knew what to do. This generation had not been through that before. The last generation that went through it was in the First World War. So we really didn't know what to do. But as things settled, as heads settled, then we started to ask questions about taxation. Where would your tax apply to? Organizations really don't want to be bogged down with cross-border tax issues for employees. Okay? Because organizations are already going through a lot in terms of tax management for corporation tax and the other withholding tax and every other applicable tax. And as it were, the simplest of all of these taxes is payee tax. You work in a state, you earn the same salary over a period, your profits differ, VAT differ, withholding taxes differ, but payee tax can just fit into a template for a period. You raise salary in January and that runs for another maybe 12, 18 to 24 months. And everything is just pretty straightforward. You compute your tax and you remit to the tax man, the state tax board. Here in Nigeria, we do not remit to the federal and state, we only remit to the state. So it's an easy template for organizations to manage. Now you choose to work in another country, that country's tax rules indicate that because you're working from home in their country, then you'll be remitting taxes to them and all of that. You come back to your HR is still, HR or financial control, struggling with tax audits from a government who's looking to balance its fiscal books and aggressively chasing corporations for taxes. And the easiest of all of the tax functions, you're now trying to add some complexities to it, and then the finance or HR just go, they just basically just go off on you and say, look, we can't do this. All we understand is we're remitting to this state government for taxes, and that's it. We're not adding any layers of complexities. So we have to see things from the organization side and trying to avoid all of these complex tax rules, because we also don't want cross-border tax issues, tax audits. There's a whole lot of back-end tax issues that employees typically are not aware of, but organizations have to manage for the well-being and going concern of that corporation. So we need to understand when organizations don't want this. There could be some level of flexibility for certain issues, okay? Special issues. A staff who has got to face health issues or attend to some family emergencies outside of the country and all of that. But in today's world, as things have settled post-COVID, when companies talk about hybrid work, they're looking at alternating between work from home and in the office weekly, and it's now the global trend. So it's not just here in Nigeria. So it's not a case of work month 1 from home, work month 2 from the office, which enables people who want to shuttle countries or shuttle states. It's work Monday, Tuesday from home, work Wednesday, Thursday, Friday from the office. In other words, every given week, you've got to be in the office, you can also work from home. Then it then makes it quite inflexible for people who want to work from other parts of the world. Now, we've also said something that part of the things organizations need to do is that they need to invest in entry-level hiring. They need to retrain and reskill. What this means is that the organizations that will invest in entry-level hiring the best, organizations that will retrain and reskill, would be organizations that promote hybrid work in such a manner that there's some level of physical interaction. Because, you talk about those coffee mixer moments where you just run into your colleague at the coffee mixer or seaway water holder, and you just have this discussion about this assignment, and new ideas just pop into both parties' heads, or you just go to the desk of someone saying that, look, let's look at this project from this perspective, and we'll just draw things and all of that. Now, this becomes difficult where one person is outside completely and all of that. So you have to look at the bigger picture for the sake of the organization. We can't just look at things from the sake of the employee. We also have to look at the things from the sake of the organization and see what works best for the organization, if they are reskilling, retraining staff, if they are investing in entry-level hiring, bringing university undergraduates for internships, and all of that. So what will work best for those organizations in that context? And I think that's what should actually dominate our thinking at that point.
Okay, that's great, Henry. Thanks for that. Thanks for that. So, but I think what it also brings the fact is that companies are increasingly going to have to face some of this cross-border issues in terms of taxation, and as someone else has mentioned on the chat, even employment laws. My next question has to do with that you've highlighted the fact that a lot of the issues that are actually fueling the immigration is out of the hands of corporations and companies. So they're actually macro issues, and one of our members of the a member of the audience has asked, that given the fact that we just have a new government coming in, what should that new government be looking to quickly, if at all, try to stem this flow? What are the low-hanging fruits? What are things that can be done quickly? And very briefly, so that.
Okay. Very quickly.
What do we expect really from an incoming government?
I'm not sure what we will get from them, but what do we require from them is more like we can tell them what we require from them. What they will do, we do not know. It's in their hands. But what do they need to do? The subsidy bill is a bit too high for Nigeria to bear. We're looking at over $5 billion annually. We're underinvesting in education. Let's look at some of the things we said. Why are people leaving Nigeria? Okay, we looked at a few of the reasons on why people are leaving Nigeria. And what did we talk about? We talked about healthcare. We talked about education. $5 billion. There's nothing else in this country that we're spending $5 billion on. Not insecurity, not infrastructure, not healthcare, not education, nothing else. So we need to free up that sum so that it could help us mitigate the fiscal deficit. Okay. We also need to, the majority, over 34%, about 34% said increasing depreciation of the Naira. We have made some big errors with the way we have managed our Naira. And the result of the way we have managed our Naira is that we've seen there's a more than 60% arbitrage gap between the parallel market and the official market. We need to harmonize the official market and the parallel markets once again. Thirdly, some of the things we have done that has led to a weaker inflow of investments into Nigeria is that we've also rigged interest rates such that the federal government of Nigeria is able to borrow materially below inflation rates. So treasuries are what, 3 to 5%. And what's inflation? Long-term rate of inflation is 13%. So we're able to borrow, the federal government of Nigeria is able to borrow well below inflation rates. We have to correct that and allow interest rates once again reflect the market fundamentals, which means that it has to take some form of benchmarking from inflation rates. So those are some of the quick wins that this government can have. On a longer term, what the government needs to start doing is to rejigging our security architecture and asking itself that, is it enough to have this federal police? Can this federal police effectively police the country in such a way that it will turn kidnapping, turn banditry? Because all these issues also have an impact on food pricing, supply chains, okay? I know you told me to be a bit brief with my response, so I'll just stop at there so that we don't open a new topic, a new macro topic entirely. Okay?
Yes, Jerry. Thanks for that. My last question, I'm going to take one last question from the audience, and then I'll hand over to Mariam. Someone is asking that it appears that a lot of finance and investment houses are springing up everywhere in Lagos, despite the gloomy business environment. His question is, what does the future hold for an average worker in Lagos who is equally open to learn new skills? Could there be light at the end of the tunnel? And I think that's a fantastic question, because that actually, brings us back to the individuals who want to stay and, and opens up, lets the corporations know that this also kind of leads to that question. How should individuals be positioning themselves? What should we be doing? And, what next? What are the upsides?
Yes, the climes we found ourselves in, the current climes we found ourselves in, give a strong level of negotiating power to employees today, stronger than maybe a decade ago. Okay, so like I've been using the question of operations and investments. I'm a CFA charter holder. I'm in the operations unit. I see the investment unit struggling to hire new staff. And then I take a walk to the head of investments, who's probably a CFA charter holder as well. And I say, you're a CFA charter holder. I'm a CFA charter holder as well. I'm in investments. You're struggling to recruit. I want to know, what do you have to lose by hiring me? I've got the global professional staff qualification, training, some level that's provided me some level of expertise and academic background. And I've got a good work culture from investments. So you probably just have to do a bit of training on me. So what do people who want to be part of this reskilling and retraining have to do today? Quite interestingly, this has been put together by the CFA Institute. And what that qualification CFA does is that it basically improves your profile. If for instance, you're in finance, it improves your profile. You pick up a resume and the resume has CFA. It's for someone who's involved in hiring, it just leads to another level of attention. It just separates a resume. The resume comes to you, CFA. Okay, just separate the resume from the rest. All right. The moment you see CFA, what do? You're even looking less at the experience. Not that experience doesn't count, it does count, but it gives you this leg in the room. And the next thing the hiring manager say, okay, this person is a CFA charter holder, but he doesn't have the experience. Should we call him? Okay, let's just call him for a short chat and hear maybe he's fit enough and all of that. What are the right qualifications you need to have? You want to pursue a career in finance? You should be thinking CFA. Okay? In engineering, maybe there are engineers here with us or other IT and software people. So what are those right qualifications you need to have? Please pursue it. That's one. Today, the world is a global learning village. You go to YouTube and opportunities we have today, I didn't have at the beginning of my career. I work with young graduates today and I tell them, do this, do that. And I say, do you want me to show you how to do it? I have a colleague who worked with me on this presentation, Ken, who would say, not really, I'll go to YouTube and see what they have. Okay, so she saves me my time. She goes to YouTube. She learns even maybe much more than I would have explained to her because she sees more videos. She delivers the work and the work is okay. So there are self-learning opportunities out there today. Go and learn. Don't be lazy, basically. And I hate to speak like a motivational speaker, okay? But let's not be lazy. Let's take these opportunities to reskill, to relearn. The internet has a lot of resources that we can make do with. Let's take those opportunities. There's continuous learning platforms these days, which is what we're doing here today, is continuous learning. You have your CFA qualification, but you need to still keep abreast of what's happening in the global economy. You are here, you've picked on a few key takeaways that you go away with and improve your profile and improve your learning and improve your understanding of these issues. So you have these kinds of continuous learning. And I know that the Diversity and Inclusion think tank have been churning out a lot of these think tank outputs for continuous learning. Take these opportunities and learn. And then very importantly, network. Network online, LinkedIn, network physically. We used to call networking all sorts of derogatory names, long leg and all of that. But it's not long leg, it's networking. That's the appropriate word for it. Network. Okay? So I'll just keep it short as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Jimmy. And I like the fact that you actually bringing it back to the individual and saying we also have a part to play in this as well, which is the retraining, the retooling, and the reskilling. Also, it's also something we need to do for ourselves consciously. And I think everything is well-rounded at this point. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much, Jimmy, for this very insightful presentation. I know that I've learned a lot. And I'm sure everyone else here has learned a lot as well. And as you said, we picked up one or two few things that we didn't know before. So I just want to learn. Some people have asked about the getting the data, the sources of the data, and also how they can get the presentation. I just want to let everyone know that the Society Office will be sending the presentation to everyone that has attended this morning. So on that note, Jimmy, thank you once again. And I'm going to hand over to Mariam Dabri, who's going to give the closing remarks. Mariam is the lead in the event subcommittee of the DEI committee here at CFA Society Nigeria. Thank you. Mariam, over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good day, everyone. Would like to appreciate each and every one of you that have signed up for this insightful event. But most importantly, would like to thank our speaker, Mr. Jimmy Ogbobine. This was a very, very wonderful presentation, thought-provoking. I mean, look at the chat session. A lot of people are just, spewing all sorts of ideas and feelings. We'd like to say a very big thank you to you, Jimmy. And we'd like to say a big thank you to Rita for moderating the event. We very much appreciate your presence today. For those of us that would like to have to watch the presentation once again, there's a recording on our YouTube channel, on the CFA Nigeria Society YouTube channel. Most importantly, we'd like to thank the society, for creating this wonderful platform. And please, we're going to be sending a feedback email. Kindly provide, your thoughts just to help, improve subsequent events. Thank you very much once again, Jimmy. And I'd like to wish everyone a wonderful day ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mariam. Thank you, Rita. Thank you to
Thank you.
everyone for attending.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
And have a good day.
Have a good day.
We are professionals. We are impact-driven. We are CFA Society Nigeria, a member society of the CFA Institute Global Network of Societies. Our mission is to promote the highest standard of practice in the Nigerian financial services industry and provide a vibrant community for our members. The CFA Charter signals the holders' commitment to professional excellence. As thought leaders, we collaborate with stakeholders to ensure adherence to ethical standards, better education for professionals, and to build market integrity. We are the leading voice for advocacy in the finance and investment industry in Nigeria. To partner with us or become our member, visit us at cfasocietyng.org for more details. CFA Society Nigeria, making finance a force for good.